Welcome to No Romance Without Finance. Today's guest is Michaela Guzy. She is an American media executive, entrepreneur, speaker, and an on-air show host. She is the executive producer for two original award-winning series, Michaela's Map and Oh, the People You Meet. Recently, she was featured on Bravo TV's Tour Group's Talkhead Travel series. Michaela is often asked to appear as an industry expert and public speaker. From curating conversations, moderating panels, and conducting interactive workshops to giving inspiring keynote presentations for industry partners, her Michaela's Map Australia series has been featured on American Airlines in-flight entertainment. On today's episode, Michaela discusses her pivot from the corporate world to building an empire as a content creator and the challenges she's had to overcome. She also becomes vulnerable and discusses her failed relationships, the red flags she ignored, and the gifts she received from the universe when she let go of what wasn't meant for her. Welcome, Michaela. Hi, Michaela. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Pattie.
Michaela, I'm very excited to have you on the show because I love stories where people actually follow their passion and pivot from the corporate world, what wasn't their passion, and turn their passion into a real life business. And as I said in the intro about you and your bio, you really are a travel expert that's turned this into an empire for yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing in the corporate world and how you made that transition? It's so curious as to how that happened.
Yes, well, the struggle has been real for certain. But life is a journey, right? So
Yes.
I was most recently, which I left in 2012, so it's been a hot minute, but I was the vice president of global travel and strategic development for American Express Publishing. And it's not that it wasn't necessarily my passion. It was an industry that I thought was changing, and nobody had a digital, social, or video solution that I believed in. And for several years, as a young female executive and a pretty male dominated team, I really fought the good fight to try to build solutions for our company, but we just weren't set up to make those changes. And we were about to get acquired by another company. And it was just really frustrating, and it was tough from a business
Mhm.
point of view. And then from an editorial point of view, nobody talked about why I like to travel, and that is meeting new people. And so those were kind of the editorial and the business reasons for making that change in 2012. And I was put on this kind of gardening leave in which I was not able to work for 4 months. And that was probably one of the greatest gifts I could have received, because at the time, I don't know that I wouldn't have just gone and gotten another job. So it really gave me four glorious months. I was out of an 8 year relationship where I've been living with him for 6. Here I just made this huge change, and it wasn't that I left and I was like, this is what Oh, the People You Meet, which is my content house, is going to
Right.
be. It was that I knew I had these semblances of an idea, and it allowed me to take risks, to try things that I had always wanted to try, and to go places I had always wanted to go, but I gave up trying because of guys or jobs. And so finally, I went off to Africa by myself for 3.5 months and traveled around. And that was the start of Oh, the People You Meet. And it started as a website and a newsletter, and it has massively expanded over the past 12 years.
That's really great. And I want to go back to just the catalyst of things that happen in our lives that we think are the worst things that could happen to us. Maybe being put on leave, breaking up with, our significant other, right? I mean, we think, oh my
Mm,
God, one thing after another. What more could happen to me? These are the worst things that could happen. But typically, I have found that in those times where just the shit hits the fan, right? Everything is just
mm,
falling apart around you. that is such a great opportunity for you just to try something new. And because I've often been there and I've been like, you know what? It kind of just can't get worse than this, right? So why don't I just try something new? How did you feel? How did you get the courage and really the inspiration to try something new when things around you were just kind of falling apart?
Well, it's, I was working at a very big company, and I saw the writing on the wall for all of the publishing industry. And
Mm,
I said this when I started having nightmares in 2008, and I went
wow.
to someone that I was reporting to and told them, like, what is your vision for the future of advertising? I'm having nightmares about it.
Hmm.
And I was told that I wasn't paid to think that way, which was kind of the
Wow.
beginning of my being like, And I held on way longer than I thought I could. And I was like, wow, in retrospect, always things in retrospect. I was like, I made
Hmm.
a pretty tough stuff that I was able to actually survive that. But it's, other than some wrinkles now, because I've been at it for a long time, but I actually look at pictures of myself back then, like here I had spent all this time and all this money on like trying to look a certain way, trying to dress a certain way so that people would take me more seriously and see me as older. And now I'm 44 and I'm like, wait, I want to look younger. Anything to make me look younger. Oh my goodness.
Right.
So there's just this funny thing that I always look back at, but it wasn't something that happened overnight. And even when I did go off to Africa and have that journey and start Oh, the People You Meet, it's not that I had it all worked out. And in fact, I've had many pivots in the almost 12 years of running Oh, the People You Meet. And one thing that I knew that frustrated me so much about corporate America, not just where I'd previously worked, but all of my jobs,
Hmm.
there were things that I saw that I was like, we should try that, and it would just take so long to get through the corporate procurement and la 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 la.
Right.
And I was just like, oh my God. And definitely a creative person, and I'm a writer and an artist and a visual
Sure.
storyteller. Um, and I knew I needed to be able to like try things and fail fast if it didn't work
Hmm.
out. And I would say anytime the perceived failure has actually been like a pivot towards something new that we've tried, and we've had some very significant pivots in the time. One fun little anecdote that I can give you is right when I got back from Africa, I had been asked to audition for a TV show. And they're like, send us your reel. And I was like, I'm a recovering corporate executive. I don't have one of those. And they're like, well, send us a video. And I was like, right, a video. So found a videographer and went and interviewed a guy that used to intern for my company, but also owns several successful restaurants down in the West Village of Manhattan, and put that little video up on YouTube. And I sent it to the production company, and they're like, oh, we've gone a different direction. And I was like,
Mm.
well, I'm going to put it on my website because it's actually an interesting and an informative video. And if someone wants to come to the
Right.
West Village and go to a restaurant, here's 5 options for you. And lo and behold, I started getting all these phone calls one day. And one of them was from the head of communications from Qatar Airways. And she had been a previous client of mine. And she's like, I didn't know you were doing videos. And I was like, yeah, neither did I. She's like, well, you're on New York Taxi TV. I was like, I am. Okay,
Really?
that's interesting. And lo and behold, that was the beginning of my being flown around the world to start creating videos about people, places, and purposes, which is kind of the editorial POV that we have with my company. And that has ebbed and flowed and changed. Season one was actually supposed to, we had shorter form content, but season one of our 30-minute show was actually supposed to air in March of 2020. Ha ha. So the show is a show about sustainable travel and human connection.
Right.
So, I came into 2020 like hot, like 2019 had been a massive growth year. We had actually done pretty well as a business the couple years leading into that. And I was living with a guy who, of course, I thought was the new love of my life. And,
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
was all going in this one direction. And life
Right.
seemed pretty awesome moving into 2020. And I had consulting projects and we had the show getting to all the things. And like a lot of people, my life literally imploded, including my relationship. And suddenly I found myself needing to move in the middle of the pandemic when it was still scary to even like go outside.
Right.
It was still at that time like where you were doing a disservice to your older parents by even going to see them. Like it
Sure.
was
Sure.
when the news showed body bags in the streets of New York. It's a
Mm-hmm.
really tough time.
Right.
So something that I did in the immediate future right away, I started my own visual podcast called Inspiration Station and just really try to use my knowledge and know-how of telling stories and from anywhere that there was Wi-Fi. And so that was where that show really started to take seed, and we did 125 episodes of it, and still
Amazing.
do occasionally, but not with the
Amazing.
regularity we were doing during the pandemic. And then from that, with the breakup, I knew I needed to leave our communal apartment. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I don't want to be in New York anymore. In fact, I like my little gypsy soul needs to get back out into the world. And I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that part of my purpose on this planet is to show people how to travel sustainably as possible and to showcase sustainable travel companies and be responsible and like really bring together that regenerative travel tissue. And I was like, how do I do that when I can't go out and travel with a crew? So I started a short form show called Sleeping Around Safely. And in the beginning, it was really meant to show people it was safe to travel again.
Mm-hmm.
And it has become a viral success, pun intended. And so
Amazing.
we have now trademarked it, and it's a show about me being a jet set gypsy that lives in luxury hotels. So now we have
Wow.
three shows.
And what's interesting is all of that came out of
Wait, sorry,
adversity,
I can't
right?
hear you. Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you.
It's okay. And what's interesting about that is that all of that came out of pivoting, correct? All of that
Yeah.
came out of the fact that things weren't going the way that you thought they were going to go, and you had to pivot. And I think that's one thing that people find challenging. And I know
Mm,
so many, especially women, and men are really good at this. Men, for some reason, have the confidence to pivot very easily. And I think it's because of the way that they've been raised. That men are raised, they're okay, well, just brush it off, keep it moving, like just brush it off. If you're hurt, get up, keep it moving. Versus
mm,
women are more coddled. Oh my God, make sure you don't take risks, make sure da 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 da. And we
mm.
are taught not to take risks. We're taught to just, be very cautious in the way that we do things so we don't pivot as well. And I fortunately, like you, I'm a pivoter, man. And I think it also comes from, the way that I was raised with my father, and I have four boy cousins that when I was young, I was hanging out with them. So there was none of this like coddling type thing. It was like just get up and go, wipe it off and walk it off kind of thing. And
If you're not bleeding, get out of here.
right, right. I remember when I played soccer and I would get hurt and my dad would be like, "Are you hurt or are you injured?" There's a difference. Like,
Really?
like if you're hurt, you just get up and you just walk. But injured, that's
Right.
that's like an injury, And I'm like, "But
Right.
dad, my
Different
bone is
story.
sticking out of my leg." He's like, "Oh, walk it off." But that type of training really taught me that it's really important for me to be able to pivot. And I just see that women just don't do that as well as men do. And you were in a male dominated industry, you were saying, as I am now. Did you also notice that men pivot better than women? Is that also your experience?
Oh, for sure. So to make it about me for one sec,
Yes.
the my I came from parents that divorced in my early-ish teenage years, and I
Mm-hmm.
do think those are formative years. And even though my dad wasn't a deadbeat dad, in fact, he worked very hard, but as a kid, you don't totally understand. He was like a homicide detective in St. Louis, Missouri, and was also the
Wow.
spokesperson for the police department through Ferguson. So it's a good thing he was bald going into it all because those are pretty tough jobs. And he was a
Absolutely.
father of four girls, but like not able to be around and not able to be
Right.
present. And we also didn't have a lot of money growing up. So I
Hmm.
do remember that money has, I've always had an unhealthy relationship with money and like with food.
Really?
And like there's things from my childhood that I've definitely spent years working on in my adult life to try to sort out. And
Okay.
I would say like I think food now I've got like under wraps, but I would say finances like I think it's still something that's always here for me. But
Tell us about that.
yeah, so I mean, my mom, a very smart woman, had a full-time job, four girls, and was still trying to be like stage mom for my sisters and like coaching and like trying to be as like involved in our lives as possible. But I was the oldest. So from a very early age, I was like babysitting sisters and changing diapers and cousins and dogs. And we have like a huge, fun, lovable family. And I will caveat that my parents have been divorced for over 30 years and we still spend every holiday together and we all go on family vacation together. So they were
Wow.
like modern family, always
Sure.
knew that I was loved, but it was like not like my parents weren't really able to be around the way that I would have
Hmm.
desired as a kid. And I
Sure.
had a lot of responsibility as a young kid. And so from an early age, I learned to pivot and I knew, and thanks to my parents, because my parents prioritized education,
Hmm.
I knew from an early age that my way out, like the way to my future, was to be as smart and hardworking as possible. So even though I might not have been the smartest person in the room, I was a reasonably smart cookie, but I was
Hmm.
always the hardest person, hardest working
Yes.
person in
Me
the room.
too.
I
Me
wanted
too.
it. I wanted it and I wanted it. And I was
Yep.
persistent. And so like when I decide that I'm going for something, like I'm going and I'm
Hmm.
like, you can jump on or like, bye-bye, here we go.
Right.
So I think I probably have, maybe it was from like a early learned nature. I've learned to pivot very quickly and from a very early age,
Hmm.
um, and out of necessity, I guess. So I
Sure.
guess I'm different than a lot of women that I do see waver back and forth. And now that I've done it a few times, I think I'm actually better at doing it in business than in my personal life. I am so hyper empathic that, with especially romantic relationships, I find myself in the beginning, it was probably more like thinking I could help or fix them. Like that was the big sister in me was like coming out and I
Hmm.
wanted to protect. Whereas um, going to more recently, I feel like it's that I'm probably I hate because now it's going to sound elitist, but I feel like I've done more self work and I am more
Sure.
emotionally in tune than even a lot of guys who in the beginning seemed like they were, and then actually like had the freak out. I could tell they have like a fearful attachment style and like they come in
Hmm.
really strong and then all of a sudden they like freak out and like run away and you're like,
Hmm.
another one bites the dust. But I
Right.
realize I've gotten away from your finance question and like the
No, no,
unhealthy
no, no, no.
relationship.
This is actually
Oh,
really
okay.
good. I like to stay on this topic a little bit because
Sure.
I think it's really important about how we approach relationships as women based
Hmm.
on how we're raised. So you were saying that, you were the caretaker of your siblings, right? And then isn't
Right.
it interesting
And
how
also like kind of wanted to protect my mom. Like I knew my mom was working really
right.
hard. Um, I knew she was very sad. Um, and that came out. So like even going to unhealthy relationships with food, um,
Mhm.
I look at some of those times of where my mom would just, she is still such a beautiful woman, but she
Mhm.
always would put herself down And
Right.
she would never put us down. She was nothing but lovely. But she would always put herself down. And like little girls take that on. And I've seen it in me and my sisters. And I personally, one of the nice things about an ex that I had been with for 8 years, when I took us to our first couples counseling session, one of the first things he said was, how come she doesn't know how beautiful she is? He's like, I
Mm-hmm.
fell in love with her when she weighed 15 pounds more than she does now. Like,
Right.
how come she doesn't see that? And like,
Right.
he was taking it as like a personal offense, but it was just that I just didn't have, my friends say I have like body dysmorphia. And I'm like, well, I
Mm-hmm.
think I know where that comes from now.
Sure.
So
Sure.
it's been a adult, lifelong unbundling. And it is something that always sits in the back of my mind. And I see it playing out with my sisters in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean, also even going to finances, like we didn't have a lot of money. Money was always discussed. And again, being the bigger sister, I wanted to kind of like shield my sisters from the chaos that was seeing. And both my parents worked very hard, worked full-time jobs, therefore weren't really around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We had a nanny at one point. Our grandparents lived right behind us, which was a beautiful blessing. Um, but we were always scholarship students, all of us. And
Right.
I knew that education was the ticket to the dance and the ticket to my future. But we were always the kind of like the poor people at the really great school. And so
Mm-hmm.
that especially in your teenage years, that that does breed some strange insecurities.
Oh, absolutely.
Luckily, there were uniforms because that kind of like leveled the playing field a little
Mm-hmm.
bit in terms of like have and have not.
Right.
But there was a long time where I felt like I've come from a place of not having, and
Mm-hmm.
like it makes you feel less than. And then
Yes.
after and struggling, and by the way, the past 3 years have been brutal,
Mm-hmm.
not only for business, but then like going out and not having a home. And I know it's all very ironic on social media because I live in luxury hotels, but that's like who my
Right.
partners are, right? So it's a
Right.
strange dichotomy, um, and
But how
something that
did
when
that
I
manifest itself? Uh, how did that manifest itself in your finances later on in life? Because I know that
mm,
I come from nothing, right? And I always felt like I
mm,
had less than. So how it manifested itself for me is that I always wanted to pretend that I had more than I did. And
mm,
when I started to have a little bit of money, I had no idea how to manage it. So
mm,
I remember going and buying a $700 Prada purse in 1996, and I had no business doing that. I had
right.
$160,000 worth of student loans. So I always wanted to pretend that I had more money than
Mm.
I did. How did it manifest itself with you?
Well, it's definitely been a roller coaster. So again, it was like something that was always talked about. I kind of always felt. I remember the first time in high school I had babysat enough of the neighborhood, and by this is like something I think so funny. I was Red Cross certified, could do like the Heimlich maneuver and CPR by the time I was 12, and now
Wow.
I like hear my friends and they're like, "Oh, we have to get home. Our 12-year-olds, can't be left alone." I'm like, "Oh, I was babysitting like half the neighborhood at that time and
Yeah.
like often at the same time. Um,
Right.
so it's just like a strange thing. But I remember going to the Gap at the mall and I bought my
Mm-hmm.
first pair of jeans, a green sweater, and a pair of socks. And it was like the biggest deal because when we had those dress down Fridays at school and I couldn't wear my uniform, like that was my one outfit that like I had
Right.
to like wear that was cool and in style. And I still have that pair of socks. Like I know that's weird, but like
Wow.
as
No,
a
that's cool.
reminder, they're in a storage unit in New York, but when I see them I'm like I remember saving up enough money to buy you. And it was a big deal to wear you with my Birkenstocks at the time. And so I've always worked hard through college scholarships, had multiple jobs. I was like the opening baker, and then I would like leave class and I would go wait tables at a restaurant, and then I would go out with my friends, and I had very active social life. I think and I probably this comes from my mom. I'm friends with like a lot of people, and now a very global community. So I have pockets of people in all the places, but I have a few like really super close chosen sisters, friends, that are in my immediate sphere. But then I've always been out into the world, whatever my world is, and my world keeps getting bigger, luckily, which is very exciting. But when I got into corporate America, again, it was that have not, like moving to New York, just graduating college, having no money, like you can't even afford your rent, even with the job that you have. And it it was tough. Like I definitely remember being like, oh, I'm this girl from Missouri that went to school in Alabama, and now I have this big job, and like I need to like look apart. I want people, my grandma, my mom, like they actually like really taught me how to dress and to care for your appearance, and that what effort you put into yourself when you go out into the world is like how you want to be perceived. So going back to like spending my 20s and early 30s trying to look older than I was and like to gain the
Mm-hmm.
respect of people, I too spent money that I didn't have on dressing the part, if you will. And at one
Mm-hmm.
point I was actually making really good money and was in a really good flow. Um, but I've had a couple really bad breakups. So I've lived with three men in my life. And in the second and the third, one conveniently lost his consulting income right when we moved in with each other. And so I ended up carrying a lot of that burden, and specifically
Wow.
financially. And I wasn't really in the position to do that. And he
So why
also
did you do
very
that?
abusive.
Why did
Um,
you do that?
well, what are you gonna do? You like just sign a lease, you move in, and then all of a sudden your partner like loses his. So I was like, okay, like, well, it's okay, and like here I'm like bolstering him up, like it's
Mm-hmm.
okay, like this is temporary, like go out, get something, like we'll figure it out, and like there might be a time if we get married and I have a kid or something that you'll return. It's like that's what being in partnership is like it's not always going to be
Mm-hmm.
hunky dory. So who can carry what weight load now? To me, that's like
Right.
compromise that comes with coupledom. But instead, which kind of in retrospect, think whatever is holy. Um, he he was very abusive and would often just like leave when things got tough. He would just leave, and sometimes
Mm.
for a few hours, and sometimes for days at a time.
Wow.
And eventually, just had enough of that and cut my losses. And he was very threatening. And I mean, at one point, he tried to sue me, and my lawyer was like, "Wait, sue you
Wow.
because you took him on trips with him and paid him and like rented out your apartment and split the proceeds with him." And I was like, he's, as my dad always says, he's like, "Michaela, your life will get a lot easier when you learn. You can't rationalize with someone that's not rational. Like
Right.
you can kill yourself trying, but it's just never going to happen." And so
Right. Right.
very funny. And I'll
Yes,
skip through
absolutely.
the one. Well, I guess it's relevant to the financial conversation, but though I was actually, we had a couple really good years of the business. And so I reinvested the money into making some changes to creating the season one of the 30-minute show that was meant to launch in March of 2020. And I was living with my third now ex-boyfriend.
Oh wait, hold on. I have
And
a question. Can we go back to this
yeah,
to the last
sure,
boyfriend to the
sure.
guy that sued you?
Number two, we'll call him
So
number two.
yes, yeah. Let's let's go back to number two because um, I supported a guy that lived with me. Okay. And that wasn't really the intention. The intention was, I mean, we were dating, he was living at home, and he just kind of just fell into living with me. And then I just
Mm.
was paying for everything. So I just ended up paying for everything. But
Yep.
right. And in retrospect, what would you have done differently in that relationship? Would you have continued to support him the way that you did?
Well, I mean, the one thing is like once you're in it, it's a little trickier, right? Um, in retrospect, with both number two and number three,
Hmm.
I would have taken more time before I moved in with them.
Okay. How long were you together
Because
before you
once
moved in?
once you're in with them, it does become infinitely more
Right.
complicated. It doesn't mean that you can't just cut your losses, but in one case, I was with him for a little over a year when we moved in
Okay.
together. Um, and there were a few red flags, but like the
Tell
crazy
us.
really didn't come out until like we moved in. And then all of a
What red
sudden,
flags did
like
you see?
I didn't know I didn't really I knew something was off. I didn't know it was like a or I didn't even know the terminology red flag, right?
Hmm.
Like this is like all newer with all the podcast and Mark Groves and all the things. Um so um there was just like one time where I was like, I don't feel like he's telling me the truth. Um
Hmm.
but I didn't have proof of that. Um and I also didn't know the term like gaslighting yet.
Hmm.
So he was also a narcissist. And now I feel like the term gets thrown around way too frequently
It
and
does. Yes.
misused. And so I'm very hesitant with that. But like we were in couples counseling and it was also very unhealthy. And
Hmm.
it took years of unbundling to do that.
Hmm.
Um, and actually, in a strange way, I think I just mentioned I've not nearly as serious, but I was dating someone for the past few months that actually just ended at 2 a.m. this Tuesday.
Oh
And,
no. Sorry to hear that.
but thank you. It was all very sudden and very strange, but I have to say, in his case, he was out a very long-term marriage
Hmm.
and it was excuses, but in a long-term marriage, and I didn't want to be the rebound. And so I kept pushing back or letting him be the one to make the choice of like how he showed up. And he kept pushing forward, which kind of put me in this like false sense of security that he was making the choices to be here. But I will tell you the last time that we were together, there were two different times where I just got this ping of like the number two ex-boyfriend, and
Hmm.
we've been broken up since 2013, and it just there was
Hmm.
these two moments where something was happening that like my gut just made me think of him, and I never think of him. And I was
Hmm.
like, well, this is uncomfortable. And I was like, what is my body trying to tell me?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Yes.
And then it all imploded, and I was like, oh, well, I guess that's what my body was trying to tell me. But luckily, it was
Yes.
before, because we were supposed to have all these like upcoming trips, and I was starting to make changes, and like my clients were writing in to contracts like plane tickets of where I was going to be going and meeting him. And so thank whatever, I don't know what you believe in, so much
Hmm.
gratitude that I kept stalling signing this client contract because I had to put the airport in.
Right.
And like my dad taught me this thing where, he took confessions from murders. And he taught me this thing that if you don't believe someone, ask them the question three different times, like three different
Hmm.
ways. And if you
Right.
get a different answer, a different reaction, you're not getting the truth. And so I
Yeah.
kind of asked this recent guy a couple different ways, and I kind of got a couple different reactions, and I was like, I'm just going to push that off one more day. I'm going to push that
Yes.
off one more day.
Right.
So, like, kind of, yeah, listen to your body.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Exactly. And that this is so important that we're talking about this because For the women out there listening, your body will tell you when something is off. And so many times we choose to ignore it because, as you were saying, Michaela, we have a trip coming up. We have these projects in the works. We've signed a lease to be together. We've done this, we've done that. And so many times we ignore it because, oh, we have our anniversary coming up. I can't tell you how many of my friends have stayed in relationships for years because, oh, it's our anniversary. Next thing you know, it's Christmas. Oh, it's our child's birthday. Oh, it's this. Then
Right.
it's, whatever.
Right.
And at the end of the day, they always say that their body was right. Their body was trying to tell them something. And when you don't listen to your body, you are not listening to source energy that is trying to tell you to get the fuck out of this situation.
Amen. Wait, Patty, it's funny that you're saying so with number one, who was actually a really sweet guy. We just ultimately wanted very different things in life. And without knowing it, my body was trying to tell me. But I was pretty young, in my mid late 20s. And on paper, he was everything that I was supposed to want to be. Like he
Right.
was a nice guy. He had a steady job. I loved his friends. I loved his family. But like, he wanted to like get married, live like in a subdivision and have that traditional lifestyle. And I knew that I needed to create something. Like I was still raising the corporate ladder at this juncture.
Right.
And he wanted me to travel less. And I was like, oh, I think I'm actually going to travel more and I'm going to do it for
Right.
myself, but I don't know what that means. So when we decided that we were going to move in together, I was over at his house and I went to bed that night and I woke up and I thought I was having a heart attack. And I'm like pretty healthy and in my
Wow.
mid
See?
late 20s. And I went and laid on the bathroom floor, sweating, just laying on the tile. And I was like, oh
Yes.
my God, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. So I go to the top cardiologist in New York City and I'm like, I had a heart attack last night. And he's like,
Oh my God.
hmm, I don't think so, but like, let's test you out. So we do the EKG. I wear a heart monitor for like 3 days. And I come back to him and he's like, I'm happy to report that you have the healthiest heart of anyone we've ever had the pleasure of monitoring hearts. And he's
Wow.
like, what is some of the stuff going on in your life right now? And I explained. And he's like,
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure you had something called a panic attack.
Yes, I was going to say
And
that.
I think you should go see a psychiatrist. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay.
Hmm.
And like, sure enough, that was the beginning
Yeah.
of the end of that relationship. But I didn't have the toolkit then, you know? Like I'm such a
Yes.
big fan of therapy and like whether it's by yourself or with your partner. And it doesn't mean that your relationship's doomed if you go. It just might be giving you a different toolkit to communicate, or it might help you get to the understanding of like, my body is like, get out of Dodge. So I call those my system eject moments when I'm just like, okay, shit got too crazy again. Like, off we go. And so,
Right.
like, back onto the pivot. And, with this recent breakup, like, here I'm at a conference with someone because we both work in the same industry.
Hmm.
And I had literally just a few days before, like, why did I say this? Don't know. Out of nowhere, I was like, hey, if we don't work out, I hope that we can walk away as friends. We work in the same industry. It'd be nice that it could be civil. Why did I
Right.
say that? Like everything was good at that time. Why did I say that? Like I feel like I had this like premonition, but I mean,
Right.
and I do mean it with like time. I do believe like wounds heal, and I do believe that hurt people.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and for the first time ever in a breakup, like where I've in the past, like I've tried to fix, or I've sent like the healing notes, or like one of them like kept trying to come back, which was never look back, don't look
Hmm.
back.
Right.
um,
Right.
and I lived the last one, number three, like he called me even a year later, bawling and apologizing for what he had done with me and to me, and then said, you're a better therapist than any of the therapists I've paid. I wish I could just pay you. And I was like, no, that's not good for me. And I was like,
Right.
I wish you love and light, but I think
Right.
this should be our last conversation. Like
Good for
I
you.
don't need to be involved with you anymore.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
strangely with this one, I got on the plane with my sunglasses and cried and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I feel like the universe has like funny little ironic messages. The person I had been seeing was living in South Africa, and in the seat in which he should have been sitting with me on the plane, this guy gets in and he just like he won't, like I'm crying, right? And I'm exhausted and emotionally exhausted. I have my glasses on. Like who wears sunglasses on a plane unless they're crying? And this guy like would not get a clue and would not stop talking to me. And I'm like, I can't help but be nice. It's like the Midwesterner in me. And I'm like, so I'm talking to him and he's like, oh, I'm a producer. I like split my time between LA and South Africa. And I was like, very funny universe. And I was like, so you
Right.
figured out a way to live between LA and South Africa? And he's like, I have. And it's actually like, I live these months here and these months there. And I was like, that's really funny because that's what I'm trying to figure out right now for myself as well. And
Wow.
he's like, let's brainstorm. He's like, who knows? Maybe we can collaborate on things. And I was like, I mean,
Right.
and all that day,
Mm-hmm.
everyone, random strangers, were like coming up and talking to me, giving me their
Right.
cards, following me on Instagram. And I'm like, what about the way I look right now is like making all these people like moths on a light come to me? And I'm like, what is going on? I don't want to talk to you right now.
Yeah.
But I did because I'm nice.
No, but you know what? You know what that is? That happens because you have let go of something that wasn't meant for you. And I really
Mm,
believe that when we let go of things that are not meant for us, we open the pathways to things that are meant for us. And I
mm,
think it's the universe rewarding us for doing that. I really do. Because when I have let go of shit that was not meant for me, all of a sudden good stuff comes to me. So for whatever reason that
mm-hmm.
is, however you want to believe it, it's because of that. And that is why when, ladies, if you're listening, if you find yourself stuck in a situation
Mm.
and you feel like you don't know what to do or if you can't leave, you have to take the first step because I promise you, once you take that first step, okay, the universe will start opening up so many doors and so many opportunities for
Mm.
you when you let go of stuff that's not meant for you. And, Michaela is the perfect example, and everything that you've said in this time that we've spent together shows that when you've let go of stuff that wasn't meant for you and you've actually pivoted, right? Instead of feeling sorry for yourself, you've thought through, okay, what can I do next? Even in the relationships, you've let go. All right.
Yeah,
And when you've been
yeah.
open to receiving new things, new and better things have come to you.
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about like pivots, and I mean, this is a personal pivot versus a business pivot. But on Tuesday morning at 2 a.m. in Las Vegas, while I'm like brushing my teeth, naked, getting ready for bed, and then he walks in, decides to, it was so weird because his energy shifted. And
Mm-hmm.
he went from
And you can
being his
feel
like,
it.
yeah, it was like
Yep.
just snow in my bathroom all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, ice. And he was sits up on the counter and is just like, I'm not ready for a serious relationship. It was cold and it was dark. And you know what? If someone can do that with no arguing, no nothing, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing that happened. If someone can do that at 2 a.m., like
Yep.
while drinking and like they'll do it again and they'll do it again. And so in that split
Yes.
moment, I did have so many questions. Will I always kind of wonder like why and where did that come from and like
Mm-hmm.
what happened? And I just kind of put my toothbrush down and spit. And I said, well, I don't want to be with someone that doesn't choose me anyway.
Amen.
And I packed my
Yes.
bags and I went and slept on the couch. And I had a business breakfast the next morning, and that was real hard, but I
Wow.
did it. And then I got on a plane and I flew back. And it was, that was tough. But like, you don't want to be with someone that like doesn't want to be with you. And like, if
Absolutely
they can
not.
do that, yeah, no, I think that was like a foreshadowing of it hurts now, but like it would have hurt a lot more 3 months from now or 6 months from now or whenever the case might be. So,
Exactly. And I think what we do as we get older, we've grown into that because, I think maybe if I were younger, I would have tried to convince someone as to why they should be with
right,
me. Why don't you want to be with me? I promise I'll be
right.
different. What is wrong? Like let's try to work this out.
Mm,
Let's try to do, that would have been the younger version of me.
yeah,
But now when someone's like, well, I don't want to be with you, I'm like, okay, may hurt, right? It
peace
hurts.
in the Middle
Yeah,
East.
but it's like, all right, deuces, like you don't want to be with me. I mean, there's nothing that you can do. And I think that really comes from
Mm,
self-confidence. And again, I think what's important is for people to understand just because you have confidence doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. Doesn't mean that,
of course.
yeah, right? So it's gonna hurt.
Oh, this
But
weekend I went to the Santa Monica proper. I did Shiodara and they rubbed me down in
right,
oils and
right.
I had an energy healing and I've seen all of my friends and girlfriends and they've taken me out and I've done beach walks and yoga and all
Yeah,
the heart open. I drink heart opening hot chocolate. Like I'm doing all the things.
right.
But a couple things, like when I left American Express, the very same day that I left, I I I was scared, confused, all the things, but
Hmm.
I made a conscious choice to not complain. And there's a
Hmm.
fine line between complaining and sometimes needing to like vent or talk through something. And I
Sure.
do believe that there's space and time in controlled amounts to have healthy dialogue to
Hmm.
work through something, whether it's with friends or therapists. And
Right.
I took that same approach because you know now that I look back at it, even at this conference, some of my guy friends in the industry were actually really cold to him. And I couldn't
Mm.
figure out why because I was so happy to be like, oh,
Right.
this person.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were like, no, man, like we were protecting you. Like we've seen you gone like go through these things and like
Right.
we didn't like his vibe. And I'm like, okay, well in the future, please don't do that.
Yeah.
Like I'm a big girl, I'm wearing big girl pants, but like
Sure.
talk to me about it. And same to the guy. It'd have been a very different thing if he's like, I'm having
Yeah.
doubts.
Right.
Can we talk through this? But he didn't do
Right.
that. He had a fearful attachment and like ran away like a little boy. And I was
Right.
like, well, I don't want to be with a little boy. I've done a
Right.
lot of work and like, who
Yes.
knows? Maybe he'll do a ton of work and get there for someone else. But like,
Right.
I was like, not for me, not right now. Like, I'm on my path and I want to attract someone that is also doing the work and emotionally available because we all deserve that. And again, I think I mentioned hurt people. So
Right. Right.
you don't want that in your life because you deserve better.
Absolutely.
But I do think
Michaela,
keeping a
absolutely.
positive attitude, not complaining is important.
And
And
having enough
I'm very excited to
self-respect,
pour myself. Yes, exactly.
right?
I did feel very disrespected in that
Right.
scenario. So it was very easy.
Exactly.
Like the Midwesterner in me was like, I'm also a Taurus. I'm very loyal. I might seem just like this jet set gypsy that lives all around,
Hmm.
but I'm actually very deeply rooted and grounded. Um, I know I come from a place of love in my family, albeit a strange kind of way of getting there, but we all very much like love and respect one another. So I think that allows people to take chances and to go out and take risks when you know you come
Right.
from a place of love. Um,
Absolutely.
so it's not always been an easy journey, but
Yes.
yeah, that's I think pouring yourself into positive things when you're going through a transition, whether it's a work transition or a matter of the heart, or even financial.
Right.
I'm still digging out of my financial hole, but like the hope is right there on the horizon. And this year has been really wonderful, like just coming back. So seasons
Great.
1 and 2 of our show, Oh, the People You Meet, have been airing in flight on Qatar Airways since January. They've done some single releases on KTLA Channel 5 in Los Angeles. Um, in mid-September, they're going live on Modern Luxury Media's new AVOD channel on Vizio. And
Congratulations.
it's just the beginning. Thank you. It has not been without struggle.
Right.
But like, it's like, it finally, like, I can see the product of our hard work, like, finally. And also, like, the thing that
Wonderful.
matters the most to me actually is telling these people's stories. And so I'm so
Right.
excited. Like, I got to interview my she hero, Dr. Jane Goodall, and we've won several awards now for
Wonderful.
that particular episode on Sierra Leone. Thank you. Yeah, no, it was really, really special. And I'm so excited for those messages to get out into the world. And we're going to film episodes from season 3 in Croatia in just a few days. And so I'll be posting behind the scenes from Croatia and Singapore and Abu Dhabi on our Instagrams. And then those seasons will be live early in the new year. So I'm just going to pour myself into my business and the people that surround me. And who knows, maybe a new love will come circling through my life. I'm ready.
You know what? You heard it here first. I guarantee you that a new love will come because you are open to wonderful and amazing things. And you know what, Michaela? Let me tell you, even if a new love does not come, you are complete and whole and happy as you are by yourself. And I think that's one thing that you should always
Mm,
remember. And that's one thing that I remember. I'm fortunate enough that I
yes.
found love at the age of 46. It took a long time to get there, but had I not met him, I would still be complete and whole and happy. So I just want to leave it there. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing your stories with us because so many women out there are going through the same things in their relationships, going through the same things, with their finances, having to pivot,
Mm,
going through hard times. And it's only with people like you opening up about their lives that we share amongst ourselves and learn from one another and inspire each other to move forward. So I appreciate you and your
mm.
vulnerability. Tell us where we can find you.
Yes. Well, where Oh, the People You Meet is my website. I'm Michaela Guzy on Instagram and YouTube. And Oh, the People You Meet is also on Instagram. And we have LinkedIn, so Facebook as well. So whatever your social channel is, please join us. We always say pack a bag and journey on with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michaela. And thank you to the listeners. Please remember to subscribe and rate. That is the only way that we keep this podcast going. And until next time, never forget that a man is not a financial plan.
No.